Well, it's a beautiful fall day here in Washington, which is kind of a unicorn. I'm going to take advantage of it. Where I left off in the last episode, I was going to be putting the fabric on the bottom of the fuselage. I had to come back and do the stringer, and then of course I figured out there was a couple other projects I needed to do. Most importantly, the fiberglass fairing that's at the back of the rudder post, because one of the previous builders tore it off when he decided to roll back the work. So I've done a little bit of repair work to it. It's still got some porosity from when it was originally made. I'm sure the new fiberglass parts from Kitfox are better than the ones done by SkyStar. It's a little bit rough, needs some help. My segment, the 30 Seconds in Alaska, was pretty popular last time. I'll do another one. I still have to edit all that stuff. Anyway, I'll put that in later. Welcome to episode 29. Thanks for coming. All right, first job for today is to get this tube that runs along the center of the belly installed. I have squished this end so it'll fit in here. Likewise, I had to squish it a little bit this way, back here to get to tuck in, mostly to get over the piece of wood. Then I went and marked all the tubes so that I could center it, and there's a million ways to do this, but one of the things I learned building wings is it's difficult to make a mark and then get something on top of the mark when it's got glue all over everything. So what I did in this case is, I'm back up a little bit. I'll just go to a shorter one. I just took a rough measurement with a measuring tape, and let's say it was 16 inches across here. Then I would make a mark that was 7 inches in from this side, 7 inches in from that side, which leaves the marks 2 inches apart. Doesn't even matter, but it's going to allow me to eyeball this center to center over the top of the two marks. I played with it, and when I stepped outside, I was able to see that this was in the middle and make any minor adjustments. So with all of them marked where the tube comes into contact, and some of them they don't, like this one, or these three in the back. And again, I have a Series 5, might be a little bit different anymore. I decided to use the method where they show you in the manual, where you drill a number 40 hole, and you use a combination of safety wire and the adhesive to hold it in place. Is it super important? I don't know, but it wasn't that hard to add, so I've deburred those holes. And then the one I thought was going to be difficult, in fact it caused me a little bit of head scratching, was this one up front, because the access to the steel flange is pretty difficult, and with the stubby number 40 I still didn't have room to get a drill head in here, so that is one I used for the first time ever. This number 40 extended drill bit, it's I think 12 inches long. Yep, that I did get from Kitfox, and always wondered what application I would have for it, so today I found out by having the drill head way out here and using a center punch. I was able to drill all the way through the steel, aluminum, and then I just blew it all the way through the other side. And yes, my drill walked a little bit until I figured out how to do that, but that's all going to get covered up with epoxy when I'm done. And then I have exposed bare metal. Sorry for the autofocus. I'm not running my GoPro today, just use my phone, and it has that annoying feature where it tries to autofocus where the GoPro doesn't know what that means. So I have exposed metal, and if you've watched any of these episodes or anybody else's build, or you're working on your own, you know the thing from here on out is to clean all the surfaces, prep everything perfectly well, use clean hands, get the adhesive mixed properly, and in this case no rivets, but I have the safety wire, so I'm about to get my gloves on, clean this up, and make a mess. And here is the stringer bonded in place. Went ahead and encapsulated the safety wire piece with epoxy because I didn't want it to vibrate around and gouge into the metal. Came out alright. I still have to do some fill and fair, smooth out this aft fairing, which was damaged by the previous builder when he took it off, took apart the whole vertical fin and everything else. So got to do some filling and sanding on that. Okay, Saturday morning update. Yesterday I got out the filler and went over this rear fairing to fill in the imperfections. Looks a little mottled and messed up, but it's actually really smooth. I'm going to come back, put some primer on here, and it'll clean it up, and it'll look pretty nice and be ready for fabric. And while I'm in a mad hurry to get the covering on the bottom, I realize there's a couple of projects I haven't done yet, and it'd be best to do them before I'm done with this making sanding dust. And one of them was to get these filler pieces in that transition from the back of the window frames to the fuselage. So you can see I just have these tapered pieces of balsa I dug out. They're clamped in place. I just put them on about 15 minutes ago. I'm going to wait for a little while, take the clamp off, take a gloved finger with alcohol and smooth out the high sol that's on here. And another place that was again unique to my situation, when I did these frames up forward, the directions have you, let me get a good camera angle on this, taper this piece down so that there's almost no step here. And that seemed odd because the boot cowl is going to come here, so it would look like the boot cowl would be tucked inside at the, what would be the top, because the airplane's upside down right now, and then would stick out at the bottom. I thought that looked a little odd, so while I did taper it, I didn't taper it very much. But while I'm standing here looking at it, of course this clamp's in the way. Actually, I'm just going to take this off, you can see it. It's been on here for long enough. When I'm going to cover the bottom of the piece of fabric, it would wrap around this tube, and then the upper piece of fabric from the fuselage side would then be bridging from this piece to this chunk of the landing gear where the main gear attaches. And that seemed kind of odd, so super long story short, this piece of wood is the basis for which I'm going to transition this same radius from here to here. It'll be filled in smooth. This will be completely encapsulated in high sol and shot with some primer. And again, I do have to primer all the metal pieces for the fabric to attach properly. So I did those two pieces, got the one on the other side cooking. Of course, got the identical tapered wedge on the other side. And what else? So yeah, speaking of sanding dust, and again, this is probably only a condition for SkyStar Series 5. I don't know when they changed it, or hopefully they have. This piece is made inside out, if you're a tooling person. This is the raw fabric with the resin, whereas the smooth side is inside where nobody cares. So I needed something to fill the porosity of the weave of the fabric, otherwise it's just going to print through on the fabric job when I'm done. And so this is where I use that same body filler that I used on my Laker leading edge, and I finally understood why they sold me that product for this purpose, and that is because I really only just barely need to fill the weave of the fabric. Of sanding it here, it's actually super smooth. There's a couple places, if you're looking at it from over here, you can see I missed it, and I've got a lot more work to do. This stuff only lasts about maybe not even 5 minutes after you get it mixed up with the catalyst before it's starting to get cheesy and hard to work. So you best just stop and throw it out. And so it looked like I was going to end up doing, I'll show you the, so it looked like I was going to end up doing 5 more batches at least before I got this thing covered, plus some touch-up work like I was having to do on that vertical fin. But last night I had this idea that if I just gloved finger, of course, I just get that stuff and I smear it on here with a, you know, just make a skin coat with that, it's basically milled fiber resin, that I could work quite a bit of it in one batch, probably maybe 2 batches, maybe 3. I can even use my finger to fill in the spots like those I missed on the other side, and then I can have this thing all slathered up with a very thin layer of that filler material, come back and just sand it one time and have this set aside. And I filmed it earlier with the rudder still on the airplane. It's actually a better view, of course. Never mind all the dust, that's going to go away. This is again a feature of the Series 5 Kitfox. If you're building a new airplane, you don't have to worry about this, but these ears are too short, so those links that attach the rudder cable to the rudder, they ride hard on the fiberglass. Is it the end of the world? No. Some of the builders, they put a little metal doubler against the rudder, and otherwise they leave it the way it is. And other builders like my friend Eric down south, I'm going to copy this piece right here at an 1/8 inch 4130, only it's going to be longer. It's going to have a set of holes, so it's going to bolt to, and you know what the heck, bond to this piece that's on here. And then it's just going to have another set of these holes out a little bit further, probably just right out here, not too much. And the rudder cables then will avoid coming into contact with the rudder. Looking for a uniform color. And by the time you get it mixed in there, it is time to go. feel it's starting to thicken up, so it's time to finish up. Yep. Spreading it thinner slows down the catalyzation a little bit, less thermal mass. Yep, time to be done. Okay, well these came out pretty good. I did come back with the alcohol gloved finger and smoothed it out. Probably just the lightest of touch-up with some 220 before I hit all this with primer, and that's going to be fine. And one on the other side is also good. Up front, I don't hate it, but it's not good enough. So I tried to effect some kind of a rescue with some polyethylene sheet so that I could slap it on there and drag that scale across without mucking it up. And then of course I rushed the job and pulled it off later on, so I lost some of the high sol. But I did come back just now with the gloved finger and the alcohol and smoothed it out. This is not good enough. I'm gonna block this out, probably come back with the Smurf poop, the blue stuff, superfill, and do the last coat. Same story over here. Not exactly what I hoped for first pass quality, but it's a good start. It's going the right direction. And you know, speaking of those fillers, now I'm staring at the bottom of this rudder and I'm imagining the piece of fabric going on here. And I'm going to copy Geek and some others that have done what they call an envelope cover, which means I'm going to use one piece of fabric that starts at the front, goes over the whole thing. So for this edge right here, I can imagine trimming it just a little bit with a little bit of excess, and then gluing in and wrapping around the corner. And that leaves a little step here, but worse than that is if you can picture the fabric pulling from this rib to this tube, there's going to be this area right here. And so if I don't do anything, there's going to be an air gap going from here to here, where ram air could be messing with my fabric. So since I'm all about fillers today, I'm looking at doing something that goes from this tube to that transition. I may sand this till it's flat down here, or I may, like I said, just go from that point to the top of the tube. So it's going to be another wedge, probably something about a ½ inch wide, and so that I can have something with adhesive and something I can pull the fabric on and attach it to, and have something that's going to work a little bit better. And if I use balsa wood, of course I have to make sure that it's fully encapsulated with epoxy, because this is going to get wet for sure. Trying to think of something else. I do have some of the foam that Kitfox supplies for using on wingtips. This stuff basically has no strength, but it would be easy to shape. Also be possible to encapsulate with the high sol. In fact, I might be able to do some of it ahead of time before I shove it in there. Well, I answered my own question. I got out some of the foam Kitfox supplies for doing the tips of the vertical fin and elevator. Anyway, so I have it's tapered to go from the edge of that little step, tapers down to the rib, and also tapers from this tube down to that point. So it's kind of a complex shape. This stuff is super easy to cut with a razor blade and a sanding block. This was ridiculously fast to make, maybe 2 minutes. And so now the biggest trick is going to be making one that looks just like it for the other side. I'm going to coat this with high sol, especially on the front, so I don't have to get back in there. Don't really care what that looks like so much, but then once it's bonded in place, I'll come back and skim coat this with high sol, so this is completely encapsulated. It's Monday afternoon, came back here to check out my work. I went over the high sol that was on here with some sandpaper, roughed it up a little bit, cleaned it with denatured alcohol, and mixed up some of the superfill. Then I came upon this idea to use just a plastic bag, polyethylene, which is known as a universal release agent. Nothing sticks to it. The superfill being a thermoset resin, does not need to have air, so that's not going to prevent it from curing. And so I laid the plastic bag over it and then used a straight edge. I was trying to kind of rock a shape into it, and of course the bag just wrinkles. All this stuff just telegraphs right into the surface, so I decided to pull it tight, and that's what you're seeing right here. So what it looks like with that plastic bag taken off. This one came out pretty good. I trimmed this edge a little bit with the 2-inch die grinder wheel. Other than that, I haven't touched this. It came out pretty good. And this one I masked it, sanded it down top and bottom, and sanded the surface with 220. A couple of super minor imperfections, I'll fill those, and prime all this. Pretty happy with that. And back to my rudder. This was my project for yesterday where I got the foam out. High solid that in place. Doubt you'll be able to see what you need to in that case, but anyway, so I'm about to come up with some more high sol, skim coat this. Actually pretty good thick layer on there. Also squeeze in a little bit more in the front. I only have 2 days before I go back to work, and tomorrow I'm going to go to Eastern Washington. I did put quite a few hours in this time, at least once I got rested up. You can see I got this filler in. It's all primed. Side trim is primed, door trim rather. Elevator is sanded and primed. Tail fairing is primed. So really, if I were staying here working for a couple more days, I'd be out of excuses for not getting the fabric cut. I couldn't help but notice this morning it was 47 degrees. I drove in, but it is nice and warm today in the afternoon here, probably 60 degrees. I fly out Saturday morning, so I am going to come back Friday at some point. I may, just like I flipped the fuselage over, in order to be able to say I achieved a goal, I may cut the piece of fabric, roll it up, put it away, but small victory. But if you show up for episode 30, you're going to see my engine, the engine mount right here in front of me. You're going to see the covering going on here. Should be a good one. Thanks for watching. And I still have to edit it, but I'll be able to close out with the 30 seconds of Alaska. See you next time.